to Mediocre Gay, the podcast with David Ian and Kate Dale.
The show that plumbs the depths of mediocrity, celebrates the ordinary, and enjoys the everyday.
Hello and welcome to Mediocre Gay, the podcast, where we cast our eyes upon a sea of ordinariness and pluck out things that we think ought to be celebrated a little bit more. My name's Katie Dale.
And I am David Ian. And today we have got a Scottish stand-up comedian and our token straight friend, Richard Cobb. Welcome, Richard.
Welcome, Richard.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Wonderful, thanks. Yeah, good. It's got a little bit lost in this building, but yeah, no, it's...
Yes, it's a bit of a maze, isn't it?
We got here in the end, so...
Good. Okay, so tell us a bit about you.
I guess stand-up. So obviously met at probably a couple of weeks ago
At some gigs.
at a lovely venue. And,
A gig that you enjoyed.
It definitely doesn't feature in any of my stand-up sets. A very successful one. And I've been doing stand-up for about a year. Moved to London probably 2 months before lockdown, which was wonderful timing. I also left my car in Edinburgh, so that was also wonderful timing for just coming down here and just being like, oh, this is nice. And yeah, that's...
And you're getting married real soon, 5 weeks.
5 weeks, yeah. So that's exciting. Obviously, very exciting. I don't know when this is going to go out. Hopefully, the wedding has happened.
It's a bit awkward if there's been a jilting, won't it?
We'll have to do a re-editing.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It's all going good. Yeah, the planning's going well. So
have you enjoyed the planning?
I have. It's been really good for the stand-up material.
How involved in the planning have you been?
Well, I don't know how much I can divulge, but I've been involved in the latter stages of it. So I guess when it's been like, so this is what we're going with, and I was like, all right, okay. I think my mum asked me what time it was happening, and I was like, 2-ish, and I think it's 1. It could be half 1.
Right, so your mum might miss it.
Yeah.
Well, Richard could miss it at that rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I think I've been pretty I think it's quite a stereotypical male thing to sort
What
of
I'm
be
hearing
a bit
is that you're a mediocre wedding planner. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, you see, and I don't want to paint any stereotypes here, but I have a feeling that in heterosexual weddings, very often the role of the male is to be a silent partner, and the bride just likes to make all the
# gender
decisions.
stereotypes.
No, I think that's true though, because it's I feel like there's it seems like a very lad Bible guy type thing to do, to be like, oh, I'm just going to turn up at this time. Probably even those guys probably know what time they're getting married. So that's awkward. But and I feel like with us, we've always been, because obviously last episode Jeremy was talking about Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
That's all right.
So in the last episode, Jeremy was talking about he'd been with his partner for 12 years. I've been with my partner for 11 years. So I feel like within that time,
God.
it's kind of, we kind of know, we've got enough, and we kind of know what each other want in the kind of wedding sense. So it's not too much of a, it's not going to go too much the other way.
Are we exclusively booking people who can do relationships?
There's a reason why we've launched a podcast and they're settling down to happy lives.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, maybe some of it will rub off on us. Okay. Amazing. So the way the podcast works, sounds like you've listened to it. Big fan. Good. And you saw the show, so you understand. So we're going to go through basically and look at things that are mediocre, but that you love anyway. So Richard, tell us what mediocre means to you.
Mediocre. So I guess as well with the research of the last episode of Jeremy saying that he Googled it, I listened to that bit and thought, I'm going to have to panic.
I just can't believe how well prepared everyone is. We just stumble in here.
I just woke up here this morning.
I feel like for me, it's kind of a lot of the mediocrity, I guess, like from that, a lot of it's, I guess, self-contained. So for me, like, I feel if I read up on what's mediocre, I feel like a lot of that I kind of like reflect back on myself. So not in a kind of like feel sorry for me sort of sense, but in a kind of, I feel like quite a lot of the stuff I do is pretty mediocre. So I feel like I can relate to it quite well, just in the sense of that I don't like stuff that I would think is mediocre. Other people who could be like, oh, that's actually pretty good or pretty interesting. Whereas I get quite sort of inward and think like, oh, shit, like nobody's interested in that.
See, I find this really interesting because I sort of thought, I feel like and I guess Jeremy kind of maybe touched on this before. I feel like it gets a bit more. My tendency, like what am I trying to say? My tendency is to think that it was a bit more built in being gay growing up, because you were othered and you were like, oh, I'm not the same as everybody else. And so I did wonder if having like somebody who I like, I've seen your comedy, you're really funny, you're confident, you've found someone who wants to spend their life with you, you're straight, like you're quite cool. So to my mind, there's like, well, I don't know, you know, he's going to come at mediocre from another angle, but it turns out that you feel mediocre as well. That kind of just blows my mind.
I guess just like in the sense of like, I think like this probably goes into the last question actually already, but like I feel like a little bit, see if I'm at like, I'm going to my sister's in a couple of weeks who lives down in Sussex, and like I'd gone to one of her parties a year or so ago when it was legal, not like during
not
the
an
lockdown,
illegal one,
yeah.
Not a Boris Johnson party.
Yeah, and like I think I was introducing myself, and I get really like weird about my sort of self-promotion, which you're going to find out about in a second, and it's just sort of like, oh, what do you do? And instead of being like, oh, I work at this company, blah, 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 I'm like, oh, I'm a writer and I do a bit of stand-up. And then as soon as that comes out of my mouth, I'm like, what am I fucking doing? And, you know, I'm just like, I've got that kind of shame of just like, this is pretty embarrassing. And then I instantly go like, why have I done that? And then people are like, oh, that's like, that's really interesting. And I'm like, yeah, sort of. And I feel like I immediately sort of like shoot the balloon down. Yeah.
It's so interesting because it's that fear of being seen. What I think is really bizarre is, I don't know if you remember, but we didn't actually meet at a gig a couple of weeks ago. We met a few months ago at a gig that neither of us got to perform at. And I thought that I knew you already because it turned out we followed each other on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I followed you on Instagram because you looked really cool.
I got told I had a triangle head the other week by someone on Twitter. Somebody's like,
was it me?
You've got
That sounds like an offensive thing I would say.
It's just funny that perception. It's just like kind of like, oh, that's really nice. But also I'm like, but I focus on the kind of like, I've got a triangle head. And I'm like, do I? I'm just like measuring it in the.
No, I
in the
don't think so.
mirror.
But I did tell you at that time. I was like, oh yeah, I follow you on Instagram because you looked really cool, and like it was really interesting in that. And then I didn't know if we'd met or not because I'm terrible with names and faces and people. And we just ended up being at gigs that we never got to see each other perform at.
Yeah.
So to me, to hear that you think that, like, that you need to play this stuff down, just
yeah, I'm thinking about the irony as well of, because I completely recognise that, and I do that as well. Master what I do. I hate that question, and I don't know why. I haven't worked out by now my sort of 30-second elevator pitch to either excite interest if that's what I want, or just kill the conversation if that's what I want, and just be done with it. It'd be a really simple thing to do, but I haven't. So I always tongue tie and either downplay it and then hate myself for that, or upplay it and then don't want to do any follow-ups. And it's just a really complicated thing, which should actually be a basic.
I can't believe that this is what we're talking about, because so this is something that I have spoken to my therapist about quite a lot. In my old life, I used to own a number of businesses, and I used to hate, like, if you were meeting new people, they'd be like, what do you do? And I'd be like, I run this and I run this and I run this. So I used to tell people that I painted the H on helipads.
How? I suppose someone has to.
Which is exactly what they said. That's the stock response. Oh, right. Yeah, I guess someone has to. And then they don't know what to say and it ends the conversation. And then I gave all that up and I trained to become an actor. And I got...
Oh, so you did actually paint the H?
No, I didn't. Like, I just used to say that because it...
Very slow enough.
Deflection.
So I owned some businesses that I didn't really want to talk about because there was no... Because when you own a business, people are always like... There's no in-between between it either failing or you being a millionaire. They can't understand anything in between, when most of the time you're just busy, like, pedaling as hard as you can to keep your head above water. But sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not. And it's really complicated. So you don't want to say anything. So then I gave all of that up and I trained to be an actor. And then I would go to parties and people were like, well, what do you do? And I wouldn't want to say I was an actor because then they'd immediately be like, what have you been in? And I'd be like, oof, a couple of adverts that you've not seen or anything like that. So then I'd go back to my painting H's on helipads. And now people are like, what do you do? And I won't tell them I'm a comedian.
But when I met you, you said to me I'm an actor, and I was really impressed by that. And you then talked about how that is who I am and what I am. And it wasn't at that point paying the bills necessarily, so you were doing other work, but that isn't who you were. And what I loved about that was that was who you were professionally.
Yeah.
Whereas, and it reminded me of something I'd read of somebody who surfed.
Was it me?
Well, it wasn't you, nor was it your surf instructor, which only makes sense if you've seen Mediocre Gay. But it's a surfer, and somebody said, what do you do? And he said, oh, I surf. And they said, oh my God, you get paid for doing that? And he said, no, but I'm a surfer. I do this to pay for the bills, whatever it was, working in.
I do think it's a really, like important way to think of it. Even if you have something else that pays the bills, that isn't necessarily what you are. Like, and my therapist used to say to me, if you don't tell people you're an actor or you're a comedian because you don't believe it, then how is anybody else going to believe it? Like, if you don't start with you. So now I do try. And yeah, when we met, I did say I was an actor.
How'd you do that in like Ubers and stuff? See, like I've been getting like Ubers to.
I'm
to
not posh enough to get an Uber. It's going pretty well. Yeah, see, that's it. No idea. They don't ask me when I get on the tube.
Tube, I get the bus. And I think stand-up's an interesting thing to say in that context, in any context, because then, and actually it ties in with what you've said about you're either when you're on live at the Apollo or you get that sort of face as well. Or
tell me a
joke. And you get people, my favourite comedian is, and it's always somebody who I...
To be fair, as an actor, what you mainly get is, you'd be brilliant in EastEnders, to go back to Jeremy. Why don't you get your agent to call EastEnders and get you in there? And you're like,
Doctor Who.
No, I hadn't thought of that until you mentioned that, Didn't realise it.
Do you get a lot of Doctor Who, Richard?
Do I?
Yeah.
I do actually, yeah. No, you said that, yeah. That's, a lot of David Tennant, or like the previous one. Somebody said that. I think the first time I got that in London was in a kebab shop in Putney. Someone's like, it's Doctor Who. So I got a photo and I was like, and I'm also like, this is killing me inside slightly.
Did you get a free kebab out of it?
No, it wasn't even like, it was somebody in the queue. So, no.
You're on that wall there now, probably.
I know.
You should have signed it.
So did you tell us what mediocre was, or did you just...
I think we just interrupted.
Sorry, I skipped around it.
I think we just spoke over you.
I gave a very mediocre response, so that maybe...
That seems on brand.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah.
I didn't know, because you said skipped around it, but the other thing I was going to say is I find it, given sort of all the insecurity that we've all just expressed around that, the fact that we've all decided to go and do stand-up is utterly ridiculous, because it is, in the context of that, because it is one of the... Well, I shouldn't say it's one of the most exposing things. It is exposing, it is vulnerable. You are putting, someone said this to me every time, even if it's just a 5 minute in an open mic night, you are putting how you feel about yourself, at least that night, in the hands of a potentially indifferent, quite likely different audience.
Yeah.
And we do that time and time and time and time again. And I don't really know where I'm going with that. It's not really a question. It's just the why we do with that when we feel mediocre about ourselves. Externally, someone looking at us and say, God, you must really love yourself to do that. Whereas actually it's the opposite. It's because we don't.
I think a lot of it is that you need
neediness,
the validation from other people, isn't it?
I think for me it was filling a gap from I used to do music, which is like another. I'm like, oh God, kill myself. But like, cut that bit out. Anyway, like I'm genuinely not depressed. So this is another thing I was going to say about because a lot of stand up, it's like the first gig I did. People are like, oh, what are you doing it for? I was like, to be on stage basically, and then there was a lot of kind of going around the big 18 room open mic and stuff, and they're like, oh, this is what I've got and this is what I've got and stuff, and instantly from the off as well, I'm like, should I have another reason to do stand up other than for me it was filling that void of having done music and kind of wanting that sort of shameless stage time. So I was like, I don't really I went to solo music and I'm like, I don't really like the sound of this, so I thought if I just get rid of the guitar and then just do that kind of audience interaction, then I'm like, at least that way I've you get that dopamine hit of kind of you're in front of people.
Don't know what you mean. No idea.
Still hoping for my dopamine hit. And so, can we ask about the music then, or do you not want to? You don't.
What about it?
About what you did. So you were in a band.
Yeah, so I was in a band I used to sell t-shirts for and tickets for. Then they were needed a bass player, so I think I took a couple of weeks off in summer and then learned how to play bass.
I did know this about you because your promo stuff, when you promote the gigs that you're doing, you always do in a band sort of poster format and presenting, and you told me that that's what you used to do when you did music.
Yeah, and it's the same with I always if I'm doing a good enough gig that merits it, if I always want intro music just to kind of bring that because with the band we used to always walk onto stupid stuff like Will Smith Miami or Rod Stewart's Income Sexy. Hot Chocolate, I played that the day that he died, you sexy thing, and it didn't go down that well. But anyway, that, I love that whole kind of theatrical side to it, and that kind of dimming the lights and walking on and stuff like that.
And what was the name of your band and what sort of music was it?
They were called Quiet as a Mouse, still are. Weirdly, I left the band, so I moved to Australia, and then I came back, and then the singer moved the band to Australia a couple of years later. So ships in the night slightly.
Okay. Amazing. So tell us something that you think that you love that other people think is mediocre.
I really love, this is going to be shameless promotion again, I really love kind of reflecting on, so have you seen the film Big Fish before?
No. Have you?
With Ewan McGregor. I don't know. I think
that's why I've not seen it, because I cannot bear him.
Good.
Conversation for another time.
So basically, it's about it's based on this book, which the book isn't as good as the film. So it was a Tim Burton film, which I don't know, 2004 or something like that. And like the whole concept is it's like a father and son relationship, and it's all about like the kind of stories that the dad says to the son, which are like pretty like a lot of them are quite fantasy stories and like did it happen? Not quite sure. So I totally love this film and used to cry at it all the time. So basically, a lot of the like if I had like high school girlfriends or whatever, like when I was in high school, I should say, I was like, yeah,
just for legal reasons.
Yeah, and yeah, I would always watch that film and stuff, and I'd be like having to look at the curtains or something just to avoid crying. And I'd be like, oh yeah, this is a pretty sad bit, even though I'd seen it like 10 times before.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of the idea of passing on stories and kind of cementing the legacy sort of thing. So then, in my head, I thought I'm going to try to become famous at something, so like anything, like making like get rich quick schemes. So I used to had this idea once for, I don't play golf very often, but I had this idea for like disposable golf balls but they're made of fish blocks. So basically we could tackle like the crisis of global warming by like feeding the fish. So if the golf ball explodes when you fire it into the sea, then it like goes out to all the fish. And
that's a really good idea.
I thought that, but then I forgot that the ocean was filled with fish and fish eat other fish. So
they're not starving to death. That's not the problem, is it? Yeah.
And like they only need fish blocks if you go on holiday for 2 weeks and they're in your house in a tank. So
what you actually needed was like some sort of anti-pollution like cleanup thing. And
also I'm like, I don't know how many golf courses are like onto the ocean as well. So.
Ice cubes that can lower the temperature. Good idea.
Good idea.
Okay, so that was you were going to use. Really interested in your turn of phrase there, that you were going to get famous with a get rich quick scheme.
Yeah, there was a few things like that, and then there was another one I thought of like this weird kind of. A lot of it revolved around fish, and I never actually really fished before. Like, it was this idea of like a kind of like a camera on your phone, and it had like a little reel on the back of it, so like the case you could just like unwind it, and you could see where the hook was going to try and catch fish.
Do you fish?
No, never. Like, genuinely never fished in my life.
Okay.
And I think it must have been linked. So basically, like when I lived in Sydney, I had like the view over like the harbour and stuff like that. So I kept often looking out the window, and a lot of what I could see was water. So I just probably kept thinking of ideas of how I could not be in the office. And I never actually saw anyone fishing from the office either. Anyway, beside the point. So basically, one day I started writing a book on my phone because I love the idea, like Big Fish, of sort of kind of. I guess like keeping the stories alive. So a lot of like people like back then were like mad into the Facebook and stuff like that, and it was all about like making a big deal about their life and how everything was great. And I just kept thinking that was really disposable. So I thought instead I'm going to write a book. So I wrote the whole book on my phone, and then had it in the sense of, because I wasn't famous at that point, I thought if I do an autobiography as if I was famous, based on my life, then I thought that could be a get rich quick scheme as well. But I guess the mediocre side of it is that I haven't really done an awful lot to merit one. So I guess from that, like a lot of people I've spoken to are like, "What's it about?" And I'm like, "Oh, me." And then they're like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, just I've got a fly in my face. Just like, yeah, just live, you know." So it's yeah.
Have you brought it with you?
I brought 4 of them with me, so I got distracted, as is probably clear for anyone listening. Yeah. So I don't know. Does this count as mediocre? Because I guess because they are quite sort of mediocre stories in the sense that they're every day. So it's sort of like, is this worth writing down?
So hang on. The 4 books are your autobiography. You have 4 volumes of your autobiography.
Well, what happened? It meant to be 1. So the plan was initially, this is going to be very hard to edit, but anyway, the plan was at the end of the book, I was going to propose to my girlfriend, and it was going to be this big thing. But then it took me too long to write the book, so I ended up.
She wasn't going to hang around and wait.
I realized as well, because I was quite keen for the book to come out. This is maybe another thing that like. I don't actually read that much myself, so I sort of think if I make them shorter books, like 150 pages, then people are more like casual readers and more likely to sort of
just Dickensian actually with the serial. That's
and also I thought I'd get 4 times the money from the one book, which didn't really materialize when nobody bought after the first book. But anyway, so essentially it was first book, which was Richard Cobb Part 1, the easier to digest years.
What, you cute? I've seen that to you. Otherwise I'm just saying
and
that
then
everyone is cute.
so for like basically, I signed the top of it when I was.
I was just
7,
noticing that
because I thought I was going to be a famous footballer that played for Hearts.
So this is the photo. I don't know if they'll be able to see that on the camera, but this photo you signed ahead of being a celebrity.
Age, but actually, no, I was probably like 9 or 10 actually at the time, I guess, and posed as if I just signed for the football club, and signed it because I thought I'd be quite famous one day.
I love this on the back. He hopes you enjoy these memoirs, but not too much, because the more people that buy this book, the more of a nightmare his tax return will be.
Yeah. Still haven't done one. I don't know if that. I'll divulge that, but. So basically, that happened, the first book, and then that was up to about the age of 18. And then I used to do this weird thing, which was going to be my topic of mediocrity, of really love advent calendars. And I used to do like a lot of like advent calendar updates, which were kind of just like saying how disappointed I was at whatever I'd find in this advent calendar. So I did that for about 10 years, and I thought I'd just copy and paste them all and put them into a book. And that one's called An Advent Story and Other Nonsense Loosely Themed Festive Page Fillers, which unarguably didn't merit a standalone book. And I think that's probably too long a title. But
I mean, okay. How many of these have you sold?
Off officially, or
I mean, whatever you want.
I think 250 of the first one, and then I've sold about 7 combined of the other 3.
250.
Yeah.
How did people find out about it?
Well, that was another thing, because I thought in my head, I was like, the obviously for like books, you need like a hook. Much like a phone app. That you go fishing.
Yeah, that you go fishing, yeah.
And I thought the hook was that I wasn't famous, but I was writing it as if I was famous. But then it turns out when you're trying to promote a book about not being famous, nobody really wants it on account of the fact they don't know who you are. And I hadn't really thought that through at the writing point. But
yeah. So how did they find out? I'm looking at this pretending I can actually read it without my glasses on.
Yeah. How did you find it? How did people find out about it?
Basically, a lot of it was kind of friends, like word of mouth and stuff like that. Some of it was, I think people probably bought it accidentally.
Okay, so where can people buy this book?
It's Amazon.
So if we just search for Richard Cobb
if you search for Richard Cobb on Google, you'll find a serial killer or a romantic pianist. So if you you have to kind of do like or if you do Richard Cobb book, there's also like a 17th century French book that's out.
Richard Cobb, part 1, the easier to digest years. Amazing. Okay, so everyone will go out and buy that.
Yeah.
And then I'm slightly confused. So you think that, so you love these, but everyone else thinks they're mediocre?
I think the concept of, because I don't feel like, even like a lot of celebrities are like, say, whenever they bring a book out, they're like, I don't think I've done a lot because I'm only aged like 30 or something. So I see a lot about people being like, you need to justify a reason for doing something. So you need to have done something big. Like you need to be like a big celebrity to have written something. Whereas I'm kind of just writing about the day-to-day.
You're talking to 2 people who have launched a podcast for no reason other than they like to hear themselves talk.
And I was just thinking about in an earlier episode when we were talking about soap operas and EastEnders in particular, and about the joy of soaps. That sort of soap is the everyday and the mundanity of it all in the details. And actually, I think there was something quite nice about somebody else's ordinary life. And I know we're really early into doing these podcasts, but what I'm already learning from talking to people is when you have proper conversations, actually have a conversation rather than just talking at somebody, Kate, everyone has so much more interesting going on with them that there is no such thing as mundane. We can't say there's no such thing as mediocre, because then we've completely destroyed the entire concept.
True.
And we have to stop, and I'm not ready to do that.
You've got 2 more books.
This one, so I think I was checking my phone screen time one day, and this is effectively exactly, I've like rehearsed the back page, and yeah, basically one day I think it said I'd been on for like 11 hours or something, and I thought like I'm probably wasting my time on this, like I'm kind of, because I get like as we probably established, like inward guilt a lot about like time wasting and I'm not doing an awful lot, and I thought I could do so much more. So then I kind of targeted the was it 2020, the leap year, which, and I thought, you've got an extra day. Little did I know we were locked down for 6 months. February 2020, I was like, oh, I've got an extra day. I might just, what can I do? So I had this like stupid idea of sitting down to write a book on a topic I didn't really know. So basically just see what I'd start to write.
Yeah.
Constant train of thought without any chapters and stuff, and just like, see how much I could get. So I sort of wrote a 65-pager, and I don't really know quite what it is. It's a little bit mental healthy, so it's a little bit about how feeling quite like a loner, like moving down to London. Although I moved down with my fiance, it was very much like kind of the both of us, and it was kind of the idea of moving to London and everything being like so many opportunities. It was a little bit like, I'm kind of 30, so like I feel a bit old to be making mates. So I kind of, it was me and her, which was amazing, but also kind of it's the two of us. So it was kind of like missing that kind of social interaction. So a lot of it's kind of like unsticking my mind and just being like, actually things are okay, kind of thing. So yeah, that was another distraction. And then I finally finished the other book, which came out at the end, I think October 2020 or something. So part 2 is actually the 4th book, but I got distracted in the middle.
18 to 30.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I don't think this is mediocre.
I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
I think it's I think even the 65 pager, that being a response to thinking about screen time and lockdown and all the impending everything of that year, just feels like an incredibly strong response. The fact that you finished them, I'm a really terrible completer of things. So my gabber is my flubber is gassed.
I also think there's something about just like the recording of like the everyday. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that in itself is incredible.
There's an amazing book, which is after the Second World War, they did what's it called? The National Diary. And they got loads of everyday normal people everyday people to just do diaries. I forgot what it's called. I'll find it. We'll put it in the links in this book that compiles it. And it's really everyday details, but it's such a rich resource of just what life is
like. Like a time capsule, essentially, isn't it?
You've done like a time capsule and I guess it was that kind of like getting away from the disposable social media aspect of like, this is what I've done. Or like, look, my kid's turned 8 months. I'm like, nobody cares. Sort of like, whereas if you actually kind of write it down and like stuff that you've done, then I thought like, if I have a family one day, then I'd kind of want to pass on the message like Big Fish, I guess, in the sense of the stories.
And a much better time capsule than the BBC one, which went mouldy and everything flooded and went rotten and didn't work.
I had a joke about that, actually. I don't know if I can say it. Can I say it?
Do it. Why not?
So like Philip Schofield had opened I had to edit this out of my Edinburgh set, but Philip Schofield opened the time capsule.
I was like, why is he asking if he can say it now? I remember why.
Yeah, and then they'd opened it on this morning, and the headline, I think, on the Mail Online was Philip's devastated as he opens the time capsule and just finds out lots of like sludge and stuff inside. And there was all of the article about how devastated he was. And I said, at least now he knows how his wife felt when he found that box at the back of his closet he kept there since the 1980s.
It's a gay joke, folks.
Yeah. Feel free to collab.
No, it's good. It's good. Okay, so wrapping it up.
And I guess I was going to say get personal. I feel we've already gone there. But what feels mediocre about you?
I think for that, like, I think I've got that kind of probably established. I think like that probably a lack of confidence. It's like sometimes it's like an overconfidence, but then it's like inwards kind of like it's like introvert extrovert kind of thing, but it's kind of slightly confused a wee bit. So I kind of get, I don't know, as much as I kind of want a lot of attention from stuff, I often sort of reject it as well a wee bit. So say like weirdly, like when I was growing up and stuff, like probably like when I was getting a bit older, actually like teens and stuff, if it was my birthday, I'd be like buzzing for it. But then on the day of my birthday, when I was getting presents and everything, I'd be like, oh my God, I feel terrible about this.
Yeah.
And I'd feel severely like, why is this happening for me? And but then I'd also be like feeling guilty about how I was portrayed. So I don't want to seem like I was disappointed by it. But then I'm also like trying to unscramble my brain and think, well, how do I appear to other people, even though inwards I'm like, this shouldn't be happening. And I feel like for me, that's the biggest downfall. And like, I kind of overactive brain in the sense of wanting to write, wanting to do music and comedy, but then also like the first sign of like, I guess the imposter syndrome probably of just like, why am I doing this? And like, you know, like going to a gig and not wanting to seem like shit at it, but then also like kind of instantly think like not wanting to think, oh, I've done really well in that gig. It's kind of like there's a lot of overanalyzing that happens. So I think for me that's like pretty exhausting. And I just find that so interesting because that is not how I imagine you to be at all. Like from seeing you on the outside, again, it brings me back to Brené Brown, who you can find online. She's this shame and vulnerability researcher, and she spoke about the fact that it's a lot of people, and she did it herself. You like manage and control where your work is and where you are, so like to prevent it becoming too big or prevent it getting out of hand, and not like let it live its natural
life. Like I mean, you've got 4 books, but doesn't sound like you've got a website that that you can just go to and buy all of these. Do you even have them on like a link tree?
I've got a link tree on my Twitter and stuff, but it's kind of.
So when we were like, where do they buy these books? It's your Twitter account, right?
Yeah.
Not like, just Google my name. But you're doing that to control like how much exposure there is to you, because it's too vulnerable to be seen. I
even feel shame saying Amazon. I'm like, Amazon, like that. And then it's like, that's like the biggest place you can get.
It's amazing. It's just that controlling of like the vulnerability that it takes to be seen for who you really are and what you're really doing. And you should be massively proud. I'm going to order your books. Not all 4 of them. I'm going to order the 2 that are about you.
You don't like into my book. I might order out of a calendar. I quite like
I'm
it.
just not going to. I know I won't read the other 2, but I will read about you and then freak you out with my knowledge.
It's like my fiance's not actually read any of them. I've read out a lot of extracts, but I mean that was kind of the stumbling block at the end when I proposed. Spoiler alert. But then
if she wasn't going to read
so was that how the proposal was? She would read the book and then get to the question, and that's when
that was the idea. But then I was watching. We were watching Sunday Brunch one day, and Joel Dommett said at the end of his interview that he proposed to his girlfriend via a book, and then. Like, we were sat next to each other and she's like, that's really sweet. I'm like, he sounds like a dickhead.
And then went to the bathroom and cried.
But the difference is that she read his book, whereas if your fiancé hasn't read your books, you'd be waiting for an answer.
Yeah, but I mean,
It'd be like, you have to read this one.
Exactly.
I have so many opinions about elaborate. That would have been lovely. And I wish this had happened because I want this to have happened. But elaborate YouTube proposals and over-orchestrated, that's a whole other episode.
There you go. Well, Richard, thank you very much. This has been amazing.
Yeah,
very
lovely.
interesting.
I might have to rewrite some of my jokes about straight white men, which is quite annoying because
it's only one.
Okay.
It's only one.
I might just have to say apart from Richard.
He's
then,
the exception that proves the rule. So you've got your books to promote. Where can people find you online?
Twitter and Instagram at the Richard Cobb. I started a late TikTok and it's not going down well. And I try and go on the platform and it stresses me out. So I've been in that. So Twitter and Instagram is the.
So it was at the Richard Cobb.
Yes.
Amazing, great. Well, you can catch me on Instagram at Mr. David Ian,
and me at Katie with an IE Esdale.
Thank
Katie
you.
Esdale.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Mediocre Gay, the podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps other people find the show.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Mediocre Gay Pod, or share your mediocre secrets with us on mediocregaypod@gmail.com.